right, good morning. Today we're going to go through the Module 5 practice test because your test is tomorrow on Tuesday. So make sure you have your practice test out in front of you. If you weren't here on Friday, please pick up a copy from my desk and feel free to take notes on there. Everyone else, if you should have it done today, please make sure that you are making corrections, filling in anything you didn't know how to do, taking notes so that you can use this tonight to study for your test tomorrow. All right, so let's go ahead and get started right away with number 1. It says the volume of a rectangular box can be found with the formula volume equals length times width times height. Find the length when the height of the box is 8 inches, the width is 12 inches, and the volume is 480 cubic inches. So this is just a simple substitution and solve problem. We're putting 480 in for the volume. The length is what we're looking for. The width is 8 inches, and the height is 12 inches. So the first thing you should do is calculate 12 times 8, which is 96. And then to solve for the length, you just divide by 96. And 480 divided by 96 is 5 inches. So that made the answer C, 5 inches for number 1. Number 2 says to compare the slopes of the following two lines, determine which of the following is true. Well, for line 1, in order to get the slope, we actually have to first change the equation to slope-intercept form. So remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So we need to get the y by itself, and we're going to start doing that by subtracting the 2x, and that gives us 3y equals negative 2x plus 6, and then divide everything by 3. So we get y equals negative 2/3 x plus 2. Well, the slope in that equation is the negative 2/3. Then we have to compare that to the slope on the line. And remember, slope is just rise over run. So we can calculate the distance we rise over the distance we run from one point to another. So when I look at this, to go from one point, I go up 1 over 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, in order for two slopes to be parallel, they have to be the same. So that means A cannot be true. In order for them to be perpendicular, they need to be opposite reciprocals, which they're not, so that's not true. So now we have to look and see which line is steeper. And one way you can compare this is by looking at their decimal values. 1/4 on the graph is 0.25. Negative 2/3 for the equation is about negative 0.67. Well, the positive or negative doesn't really matter here because we're just looking at steepness. So overall, the steeper line is the negative 2/3, which is line 1. So that's why the answer is C. Line 1 is steeper than line 2. Number 3 is your system of 3 equations with 3 variables. It says a bakery sells 950 cakes in a given month. This includes chocolate, marble, and vanilla. So the first thing I'm going to do is define my variables. X is chocolate, Y is marble, Z is vanilla. And then I'm going to start writing my equations. So I know that if they sell 950 cakes in a month, that means the number of chocolate plus marble plus vanilla equals 950. Your other two equations are a little bit weird, so I'm going to start by writing those off to the side. It says twice the chocolate cakes sold, so that would be 2x, is 3 times the vanilla cake sold, so 3 times z. Now we want this equation to look the same as our first equation in the form x plus y plus z equals some constant. So I've got the 2x. There are no y's in this equation, so I'm going to put plus 0y. But our z is on the right side of the equation and we need it on the left side. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract it over so that I get minus 3z. And that leaves 0 for the constant on the right side. And then our last equation says that the total number of marble cakes and vanilla cakes, so that would be y plus z, is 200 more than, so 200 plus the chocolate cakes, which is x. And this one's already pretty close to being in the format we need. We just need to move that x over. So I'm going to subtract it over to the other side, and that gives me negative x, that's negative 1x, plus y plus z equals 200. Now from here, you can either do double elimination by hand or set up the matrix equation. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up the matrix equation. So to do that, remember you set up your equation of coefficients. So we have 1, 1, 1, 2, 0, negative 3, negative 1, 1, 1. And we need to multiply it by some matrix x, y, z so that we get this matrix of constants, 950, 0, 200. So in your calculator, this is going to look like matrix A times x equals matrix B. Well, the only way to solve for x is to get rid of A, and the only way to get rid of A is to multiply by its inverse. Now remember, when you multiply a matrix by its inverse, they cancel out to the identity matrix, which is the matrix equivalent of 1. So you're just left with x. So in order to get x, we need to do A inverse times B. So first of all, we need to put A and B into our calculator. So I'm going to review with you how to do that. So you go to your graphing calculator, you push second matrix, highlight over to edit. Matrix A is going to be a 3 by 3, and your elements are 1, 1, 1, 2, 0, negative 3, negative 1, 1, 1. Make sure you hit enter after the last element, and then push second quit to close out of the matrix. Go back in, second matrix, over to edit, down to matrix B. This is for our constants. It's a 3 by 1. And our constants were 950, 0, 200. Again, push enter after the last element, and then push second quit. So we're looking for A inverse times B. So second matrix, A. The inverse button is actually that button you've been pushing for the matrix. It's the x to the negative 1 button, times second matrix, B. And then push enter, and you get this matrix. It's a 3 by 1, 375, 325, 250. So I'm going to go back to my notes. And what I end up getting is this matrix that says 375, 325, 250. The first element is x, y, z. And now we have to go back and actually read the question. The question says, how many vanilla cakes were sold? Well, according to our definitions, z is vanilla. So the answer is 250, B. Okay? Number 4, this is a review of transformations on functions. Even though this is an absolute value functions, the rule is still the same for quadratics, which is what we've been working with more recently. So it says, given the function g of x equals 2 times the absolute value of x minus 3 plus 4, describe the transformations applied to the parent function f of x equals absolute value of x. So we're looking at 3 different things, a, h, and k. Now, remember, your a value tells you about the stretch or the shrink. So the 2 out front, because it's positive, tells you it opens up, and because the value 2 is greater than 1, that tells you it's been stretched by a factor of 2. So we're going to look all of our answers, out of all of our answers, only B has that. So we can right away select that as our answer. But let's look at our other options. The x minus 3 tells us that we're moving positive 3 units, because that one's opposite. And then the plus 4 tells us we're moving up 4 for the vertex. So that means right 3, up 4, which is exactly what happens in option B. Okay. Number 5 says, what is the approximate domain and range? Well, remember, domain goes left and right, range goes up and down. And we're looking for the domain and range for this particular window of the graph. So going left to right, we start at 0, and we end at approximately 12, somewhere between 10 and 15. So for the domain, that eliminates everything but E. And then let's double check on our range. We go from approximately 0 up to the highest point being 30. And that matches for E as well. So that is your answer there. All right, this next section is matching. You can see that I have the answers up here for you. It will be matching on your test, and the whole point of the section is so that you can have a place where you can see what the equations for the conic sections should be. So you need to be able to recognize the difference between a parabola, circle, ellipse, and hyperbola. So let's start with parabola. A parabola, remember, only has one of its terms being squared, either the x or the y. So that's option 8 here, and it says x squared equals 4py, where remember p is your focus. So that's D. Okay. Next thing we need to know about is a circle, and that should be fairly obvious because a circle is the only thing with a radius, and the only option with an r in it is 7. So 7 is your equation of a circle, F. Then we're going to move to ellipses and hyperbolas. Now remember, the biggest way you can tell the difference is that an ellipse has a plus sign in between them, and a hyperbola has a minus sign between them. So we know that our ellipses are going to be options 10 and 11. And we know that our hyperbola is going to be options 6 and 9. Now, if we go to the ellipses and we look between 10 and 11, the way that you tell if an ellipse is vertical or horizontal is by looking to see where the larger number a squared is located. When it's located under the x, that makes it a horizontal ellipse. That's what makes number 10 C. When a squared is located under the y, that's what makes it a vertical ellipse, and that makes your option B. For hyperbolas, it's a little bit different. In order to tell if it's horizontal or vertical, you look and see which variable comes first. So for horizontal, the x squared would have to come first, which is what makes number 9 A. And for vertical, the y squared has to come first, which is why 6 is E. Okay? So please make sure that you know the difference between all of those equations. On number 12, it says, suppose a signal from a radio transmitter tower can be received up to 300 miles away. The following points represent houses near the transmitter tower, with the origin representing the tower, which house is not within range of the tower. So remember that a transmitter tower emits a signal in the shape of a circle. So we can use our circle formula, and if you don't remember it, look back at the matching section. Tells us that our transmitter tower is at the origin, so 0, 0 is our center. So we can use x squared plus y squared, and we're looking to see which house is not less than or equal to our radius, which in the problem they give us is 300 squared. So we know that 300 squared is 9,000, or 90,000, sorry. And we're looking to see which set of xy values squared and then added together is greater than that. Now some of you are just simply adding together x plus y to see which one's bigger than 300, and that will not work. You have to use the squared values. So you can be smart about the way you do this. Look for your largest overall values, which to me look like option D, 200 plus 225. So I'm going to put in 200 squared plus 225 squared. And when I put that in my calculator, I get 90,625, which is clearly not less than or equal to 90,000. So that puts option D out of the range. All of the other options will be within the range. Okay. Number 13 says some colleges and universities have large telescopes for their students to study the stars and planets. A college has a reflecting telescope with a primary mirror that is 24 feet wide. A cross-section of the primary mirror is in the shape of a parabola. Here's our first piece of useful information. It says the focus, that's important, of the parabola is 0, 11.25, and the vertex is 0, 0. Write an equation in conic form, x minus h squared plus, or equals 4p y minus k. Well, you should recognize this is the equation of the parabola. The only added parts are the h and k, which are your vertex, but they tell us those are 0, 0. So we're still dealing with our regular x squared equals 4py. Now remember, p is the focus. And there's two pieces of information in the problem we could potentially use, the 24 feet or the 11.25. Well, the 24 feet is some distance of the mirror. This is nothing about the focus. It's just there to distract you. The part that talks about the focus is the coordinate 0, 11.25. So that actually needs to go in for p. So that we have x squared equals 4 times 11.25y. And then you simply have to multiply those together. So you get x squared equals 45y, just like you see here. Okay? Number 14 says, given the equation for a circle is x minus 12 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 4, identify the center and the radius. So you know that this is your h and your k. What you have to remember is that you're set equal to r squared. So that makes the center 12, negative 3. You have to take the opposites when you pull them out of the parentheses. And if r squared is 4, that means our radius, when you take the square root, is 2. So that is option D. Okay, so 14 answers D. On number 15, it says write the equation in standard form for the given circle. So the first thing I like to do is quickly write out what the center and radius are. So the center is at 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, the point 4, 4. And our radius is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when I go ahead and write the equation of a circle, x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals radius squared, I'm going to go ahead and put in my h, k, and r. So I have x minus 4 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals my radius 5 squared. And then make sure you go ahead and square that radius. So you get x minus 4 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals 25. Okay? Number 16 says graph the following ellipse. Identify the vertices and co-vertices. So the first thing you want to do is identify, is this a horizontal or is it a vertical ellipse? And remember, you look to see where the larger number is located. And since our larger number, a squared, is located under the x value, that makes this horizontal. So I'm going to jot that down so I can compare my final answer with what I am saying it should be. And since I've identified my a squared value to be 81, that makes a 9 when you square root it. And since our vertices are on the larger axis, and this is horizontal, our points are going to go left and right. So that means negative 9, 0, and positive 9, 0. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch those. Oops, that was 8. I want 9. Okay. Our co-vertices then depend on our smaller number, b squared. And since that is 36, when you take the square root, b is 6. And our co-vertices then have to go the opposite direction. So since this is horizontal, our coverts have to go vertically. So that means up 6 and down 6. Of course, you can use the plus or minus sign and just write the coordinate once. Up 6, down 6. And then go ahead and make a nice sketch of your ellipse. Okay, now generally you have to do the foci, but since it doesn't ask for them in this problem, I'm going to go ahead and just leave it at that. Okay. Number 13 says write the equation of the given hyperbola. Well, first of all, we know that hyperbolas have the minus sign in between the x squared and the y squared. So that means I'm going to eliminate b, d, b and d. Okay. The next thing I can tell is that this thing is vertical. It opens up and down. So that means my y squared should come first. So that means I'm going to eliminate e. And now, to tell the difference between a and c, you have to look and see where your vertices are. Our vertices are at positive 5 and negative 5. So that means a is 5, which means a squared is 25. And remember, for hyperbolas, a squared always comes first. So option A has 16 coming first. We can eliminate it. Our only option then is C, which has the 25 coming first, which means the answer is C. So really important that you use process of elimination here to help you with this problem. Okay. Number 18 asks us to use completing the square to write the equation in standard form. So remember, we have quite a process here that we have to follow. Steps 1 and 2 say to group your like terms, so get your x's together and your y's together, and move your constant over. So I know I'm going to be adding 311 to the other side. And now I'm going to go ahead and group my 25x squared plus 50x plus my 16y squared minus 64y equals 311. So when I go ahead and group together my x's and my y's, I need to complete the square in each of these groups. So I need to factor out the leading coefficient. So from the x's, I'm factoring out the 25, and that leaves me with x squared plus 2x plus blank to complete the square. From my y's, I'm factoring out a 16. So plus 16 times y squared minus 4y plus blank to complete the square equals 311 plus blank plus blank. I'm going to put those there so I don't forget to add them to both sides. Okay, so now I need to figure out how to find that missing value. Well, you take your b term, 2, divide it by 2, cut it in half, so you get 1, and then square it. 1 squared is just 1. Now, whatever I add to one side, I have to add to the other side to balance it out. But even though I physically wrote a 1, if I were to redistribute that 25, I really added 25. So I have to add 25 to the other side to balance that out. Okay? Same thing for the next one. I take my b term, -4, cut it in half and get -2, and then square it. -2 squared is +4. So I'm physically writing a 4 over there, but if I were to redistribute that 16, I'm really adding 64. So I'm going to do plus 64 on the left side. Okay. Now the whole reason that we wanted to get some perfect square trinomials here, complete the square, is so that I can write these trinomials as two identical binomials. So I know that they have to be x times x for the first one, and I'm looking for factors of 1 that add up to 2. Factors of the c value that add up to b. So for us, it's 1 and 1. So plus 1 for the x's. For the y's, I'm looking for factors of 4 that add up to -4. Well, that's going to be -2 and -2, because they add to -4, but they multiply to +4. And on the right, if I combine all my like terms, 311 plus 25 plus 64, you get 400. Okay? Now the whole reason we wanted to write the two binomials is so we could write it as 1 binomial squared. And then we're almost there. We just have to get set equal to 1. So I'm going to divide everything by 400. And when I do that, I get equal to 1. 25 and 400 are both divisible by 25. So I get x plus 1 squared over 16 plus 16 and 400 are both divisible by 16. So I get y minus 2 squared over 25. And there I have it. This is my final equation in conic form. And now I can identify that this is an ellipse because of the plus sign in between. And I can identify that it's vertical because the larger value is under the y. So we have here a vertical ellipse. Okay? Our last question then is to solve the system of equations. We're going to use this using substitution. So in order to do substitution, we need to get one of our variables alone. And remember, I always recommend that you get your linear equation alone by isolating the y. So for us, it's going to mean subtracting the x in the second equation. And we get y equals -x plus 1. And for substitution, that means you're going to take all this stuff that y is equal to and sub it in for y in the first equation. And when I rewrite that first equation now, I'm going to get x squared plus, and instead of y, you now have -x plus 1 squared equals 25. Well, it's really important that you remember here what it means to multiply or to square a binomial. That means you need to multiply it by itself. And when you multiply a binomial by another binomial, that means you have to FOIL. So we have x squared plus -x times -x is positive x squared. -x times 1 is -x. 1 times -x is -x. 1 times 1 is positive 1 equals 25. So now I'm going to combine like terms. X squared plus x squared is 2x squared. -x minus x is minus 2x plus 1 equals 25. Well, this is a quadratic equation, and to solve a quadratic equation, we can factor it. But in order to factor, we need to be set equal to 0. So I'm going to move this 25 over to the other side so that I get 2x squared minus 2x plus, or actually 1 minus 25 is minus 24 equals 0. Okay? I can simplify this by dividing everything by 2 so that I get 1x squared minus 1x minus 12 equals 0. And now to factor this, I know the only way to get x squared is x times x. Factors of negative 12 that add up to negative 1 are negative 4 and positive 3. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. And that makes my solutions x equals positive 4 and x equals negative 3. But in order to graph these, I need to get some y values. So I'm going to come all the way back up here to my equation, y equals negative x plus 1, and plug in my values. So when x is 4, a positive 4, negative x is 4 plus 1 is negative 3. So that means here y is negative 3. When x is negative 3, negative x, negative 3 plus 1, well, negative turns to plus. 3 plus 1 is 4. So when y was negative 3, or when x is negative 3, y was 4. So that means our two solutions here are the coordinates 4, negative 3, and negative 3, 4. Okay? All right, that's all for the practice test. Again, hopefully you took notes on this and studied. Your test is tomorrow, so if you want to get a head start on it because we have the shortened classes, please feel free to come in before school, 10 or 15 or 20 minutes early to get a head start. Otherwise, if you don't finish in class, you'll have to come back up after the assembly before you leave for break to finish that. All right? I will be back today after school if you want to stop in, if you have any questions or need to get some work done. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow.